Good evening, you're watching Left, Right and Centre. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh today said that Chinese troops tried to unilaterally change the status quo in Tawang in Arunachal Pradesh on the 9th of December by transgressing the line of actual control, a move that he said was repulsed by Indian soldiers. Making a statement in both houses of parliament today, Mr. Singh said Indian soldiers compelled the Chinese troops to return to their posts. He said some soldiers on both sides sustained some injuries in the clash, but that no Indian soldier had been killed or had been seriously wounded. Let's first listen in to the Defence Minister's statement.
9 दिसंबर 2022 को पीएलए ट्रुप्स ने तवांग सेक्टर के यांगसे एरिया में लाइन ऑफ एक्चुअल कंट्रोल पर अतिक्रमण कर स्टेटस को एक तरफा बदलने का प्रयास किया। चाइना के इस प्रयास का हमारी सेना ने दृढ़ता के साथ सामना किया है अध्यक्ष महोदय, और इस फेस ऑफ में हाथापाई भी हुई है। भारतीय सेना ने बहादुरी से पीएलए को हमारी टेरिटरी में अतिक्रमण करने से रोका और उन्हें उनकी पोस्ट पर वापस जाने के लिए मजबूर कर दिया। अध्यक्ष महोदय, इस झड़प में दोनों ओर के कुछ सैनिकों को चोटें भी आई हैं और मैं इस सदन को अवगत कराना चाहता हूं कि हमारे किसी भी सैनिक की न तो मृत्यु हुई है और न ही कोई गंभीर रूप से घायल हुआ है।
Well, joining us first on the program tonight, we have Lieutenant General D.S. Hooda, the former Northern Army commander, with us this evening. General Hooda, thank you very much for being with us. How do you look at this incident in the context of the fact that it seems to be the most serious incident since the Galwan clash a couple of years ago that left 20 Indian soldiers dead and several Chinese soldiers dead? Is this something that you would take fairly seriously?
Nidhi, thank you. Thank you for calling me on this program. I will certainly take it seriously. I know there are statements that this area of Yangtze, there have been regular incursions that have taken place, starting from 2006. And in fact, in 2020, October, we had a similar incident. But I think we need to put every incident in a proper context. And when we are seeing what has happened, you look at the fact that we have an ongoing standoff for more than 2.5 years that's happening in eastern Ladakh. The fact that so much violence has accompanied this particular incident is fortunate that, no soldiers from either side have lost their lives. But the fact is that the Chinese came in with the intent to do violence. This wasn't routine patrolling activity because as per some reports, it's happened around 3 a.m. in the morning. So obviously it's not something, that like a routine patrol that has met each other. So I would say also keeping in view that trust has broken down on both sides, the fact that confidence building measures and protocols have weakened, I think we need to look at this incident seriously. And I'm sure, despite whatever sort of public statements are being made, I'm quite sure that the army is looking at it in a serious manner.
Now, sir, the timing of this, how do you look at the fact that it has happened at this time? We know, of course, as you mentioned rightly, that the trust has broken down between both sides. We don't have an entirely normal relationship with China at the moment. But despite that, this transgression happens in this way. What do you make of it? What is the message that's coming from there?
So the message, I think the army chief also mentioned this, when you're trying to look at what the intent is, you have to judge it by their actions. And what we are seeing actions that are happening both on the eastern sector and also in the western sector, where we still have an ongoing sort of, deadlock over the areas of Depsang and Demchok. It's quite clear that we are not going to see an early resolution of what has happened on the LAC in eastern Ladakh. It's quite clear that we are going to see tensions persist along the LAC. That to me is a sort of a clear message. Why some 300-400 or whatever numbers are being given, 600 soldiers coming at night, literally attacking an Indian army post? Obviously, it shows, the intent of the Chinese and that really our hope that, peace and tranquility will return to the LAC, I think is belied.
It was one of the concerns, wasn't it, sir, when Galwan happened, that the Chinese, being in the more aggressive state that they are at the moment, that they would try to open up another front on different parts of the line of actual control. And that is what seems to be happening. And you're suggesting that we haven't seen the last of this, that there could be more serious incidents, over the next few months and years.
So, Nidhi, what has happened is, as I mentioned, trust has broken down. There were fairly detailed protocols, confidence-building measures that kept peace along the line of actual control. That when soldiers would come, patrols would sort of meet each other in disputed areas, no violence, everybody would quietly go back, there would be no tailing of patrols. The trust and confidence has completely broken down. And therefore, your local incidents like this have the potential to escalate into something larger. Which is why I'm saying we need to see this in the context of what the overall environment is and not look at it merely as, look, Yangtze has been happening since the last 15 years, so we should just look at it in that manner. The context is now completely different and the potential for escalation today exists. So I think, we need to be careful. The Chinese need to also understand that, this is what is likely to happen. And so, if they are serious about, as they say, the stability along the line of actual control, then they need to control some of this activity that they're doing.
But when you say that this has the potential to escalate, and in what way? Are we talking about, a war, a full-blown war, a limited conflict? What would it be?
So, Nidhi, I don't think either side wants a full-blown war, nor are the sort of Chinese sort of interested. The problem is the potential of local conflicts escalating out of control. So we saw what happened in Galwan. And after Galwan, the orders were issued that, look, at that time it was said that, weapons will not be used, rifles will not be carried, individual weapons will not be carried. Thereafter, orders were given that, look, you can carry your weapons, you can fire in self-defense. Once, firing breaks out along the line of actual control, even in a local area, I see, this escalating. And once, it escalates, for example, at Yangtze, who's to say that it won't, a similar activity will not take place 20, 30 kilometers away when troops, try and gain some sort of advantage over each other. So I don't think there's going to be an all-out war, but we are going to see escalation if incidents like this keep happening. And these local escalations can then lead to, I think, a little sort of wider regional kind of problems.
Well, I think that is a warning. I'm sure that the government is aware of a potential threat the government is aware of as well. And let's see how this plays out. General Hooda, thank you very much for your perspective on that important story tonight. So, General Hooda, they're saying that this has the potential to escalate if incidents like this keep happening. And he predicts that that may very well be the case. It's a very different context, a very different China that we're dealing with. Now, here at home today, we saw the defense minister there giving these statements in both houses of parliament. The opposition, however, kept demanding a discussion on the issue in the House, which was rejected. The opposition insisting on greater transparency from the government on this particular issue. Well, joining us is our panel this evening. We have former Ambassador K.C. Singh joining us tonight. Konchok Stanzin, who is a councillor of Chushul in Ladakh with the Autonomous Hill Development Council, is joining us today. Mr. P.K.D. Nambiar, supporter of the BJP, and from the Congress, national spokesperson Rohan Gupta is with us. Let me first ask you, Konchok Stanzin, you saw firsthand what happened in Galwan, what happened in Ladakh, and that has been a very prolonged standoff with China, many rounds of military talks and discussions. When you heard about what happened in Arunachal, what went through your mind?
Thank you for having me here. मेरा तो यही कहना है कि अभी लद्दाख की जो स्थिति है, जो 16 राउंड टॉक अभी तक हुआ है, अभी भी दो फ्रिक्शन पॉइंट है, जैसे डेप्संग है, दमचोक है, वो सेटल नहीं हुए हैं. अभी भी बॉर्डर पे डिप्लॉयमेंट पहले जितना है, काफी अभी भी डिप्लॉयमेंट वहां पे है. तो स्थिति यहाँ पे भी पूरी तरीके से रिजॉल्व नहीं हुआ है. उसके बाद एक अलग से इस तरीके का न्यूज अरुणाचल साइड से आना, तो उससे बिल्कुल हमें चिंता होते हैं, क्योंकि हम भी बॉर्डर एरिया से हैं, मेरे कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंसी पूरे बॉर्डर एरिया से है, तो हर जगह तो चाइना का इंटेंशन को हमें समझना होगा। और मेरा तो यही मानना है कि अभी तक के जितने भी जो इशू हो रहा है चाइना के साथ, क्योंकि ये परसेप्शन की लड़ाई मैं समझता हूँ, क्योंकि इंडिया और चाइना के बीच 3440 जो किलोमीटर्स है जो शेयर करते हैं, जिसका पूरी तरीके से प्रॉपर डिमार्केशन नहीं है, तो वो उसका भी अभी तक के जितने भी हुआ है चाइना के साथ हुआ है, वो मैक्सिमम डिस्प्यूटेड एरिया और ये परसेप्शन के मैक्सिमम झड़प हुआ है। तो ये चीजें जो है बार बार आना और उससे पूरी तरीके से हमारे जो अभी तक के जो इशू है वो रिजोल्व नहीं हुआ, जिसके बाद अलग से एक इशू यहाँ पे खड़ा करना, वो पूरी तरीके से हम समझते हैं कि उनकी इंटेंशन को हमें सीरियसली लेना पड़ेगा और हमें इसको एग्रेशन दिखाना पड़ेगा। और हम सब चाहते हैं कि बॉर्डर पे एक पीस और ट्रैंक्विलिटी हो, लेकिन ऐसा न्यूज आता है तो फिर नेचुरली हर सबको ये लगता है कि अब जो चाइना का क्या इंटेंशन है उस पर भी हमें सोचना पड़ेगा। जी
Konchok ji, I'll come back to you in just a moment. Ambassador KC Singh, in terms of how India can deal with this, before I come to the political debate, I wanted to ask you, there is a military level engagement and there is a limited diplomatic level engagement that is taking place as well. What has happened on the 9th of December comes also about 3 weeks after the Prime Minister and President Xi actually met and greeted each other on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Bali. What do you make of the timing then? It has happened in the past as well when the two leaders have met, although this was not a formal meeting, that you've had transgressions on the LAC. This, of course, has a more serious context.
Look, this is part of tactics used by China. But let me come to their strategic assessment first. Their strategic assessment is that they do not want another rival in Asia. If there's any other rival that they recognize, that is the United States. Russia itself has receded after Ukraine. So they feel that India has to be contained. So the border issue is used by them to put pressure on India, either to condition Indian behavior, that India should not go close to America, should not go in the Quad. You know, don't forget that in Uttarakhand, we just had a joint military exercise with the Americans. Now, I don't know whether that provoked them or what provoked them, but we had some warning signals because the military-to-military talks, which were to de-escalate the post-Galwan situation, had been not scheduled by the Chinese. We had been reminding them they were due. So, which means these are warning signals. And even on the sidelines of G20, although Prime Minister greeted, he had to greet him because they are in the same meeting, but they didn't sit down and have a sit-down discussion, which President Xi did with various other leaders. Not all the leaders, but some of the top leaders he had a discussion with, which means there was residual concern on both sides, even at the political level, or distrust, which had still not been, from India's point of view, Prime Minister was right. Because unless they completely de-escalate in the Ladakh area, which means including Depsang Plains, it'll be difficult for Prime Minister to explain what exactly is he to discuss with President Xi. So therefore, this tension was always there. And I think after the Uttarakhand exercise, the Chinese did make some noise. And we told them it's for us to decide whom we exercise with. So there is a strategic thing that they will continue to put pressure on you. And then these are tactics. Why do they do? Now, tactically, it may have been for various reasons. One is, of course, to send a signal that they're telling you, don't do this to the Americans. Second is, they will continue to salami slice, improve along the LAC, see if they can push and capture some heights. And finally, the situation in China is quite difficult at the moment. Today's New York Times relates a story out of Beijing. They said Beijing is wearing a look of a lockdown, even though there is no lockdown, because the disease has spread. People are at home. Medicines have flown out of the pharmacies.
Right. So are you saying in a sense it's a distraction?
So there is an internal problem in terms of the spread of the disease after the zero COVID policy has been rolled back. So there is a slowdown of the economy. There is a health crisis. Is it a diversionary tactic? That is the other thing. Now, any autocratic government, any strong...
Those are interesting reasons to look at. Rohan Gupta, the opposition today across the board demanded a discussion on this. You didn't get that. The government keeps saying that it is sharing whatever it can. It's a national security matter. It's a sensitive matter, etc. But tell us why you think it's important to actually have a proper discussion on the floor of the House.
Nidhi, we have seen this government that they have always been in denial mode as far as China is concerned. This is not the first time that China could have courage to enter our borders. But if you see last 2 years, BJP has never named China in any of their statements. They have not even admitted that China has entered Galwan. All this started with 2017 Doklam issue. When Chinese entered our border, they created a structure. We kept silent. 2020 again Galwan happened. All these incidences, BJP has always been in denial mode that nobody entered our borders. When the government is in denial mode, obviously the courage of China is going to increase. I was listening to one of the panelists here. He was referring to the various possible reasons, and I completely agree. China has been completely internally devastated. Obviously, they will put pressure outside. They will attack India, but they should not have courage to attack India again. And for that, discussion is very, very important. But if this government is in denial mode and they are not ready to discuss the problem, the solutions will not come. We cannot trust China. Obviously, there is no absolutely discussion on that. But you cannot fight China after being in denial mode. This government has put themselves in a situation that they cannot name China. If they cannot name China, how can they put international pressure on China? In Galwan issue,
let me ask Mr. Nambiar about that. Mr. Nambiar, you're not a BJP spokesperson, and it's a bit unfair, but you're the only one brave enough to come in and tackle this. But don't you think it is important for an issue as important as this for the country to be discussed on the floor of the House? Why not? Why shouldn't there be a discussion? Why shouldn't the opposition be taken into confidence as well?
Today, in a political discourse, I have seen today the Mamata Banerjee, generally a big critic of the Modi government, or rather one of the most vocal critic of the Modi government. She was making a very matured statement. Anything and everything related to an external offense, and when it comes to the defense matters of this country or the border matters, we all stand with the government. And there are things which needs to be put it in public domain, and we need to have a discourse, but there are few things which we should not. I agree with Ambassador K.C. Singh very completely. In other words, on the one side there is a frustrated China which is going through an internal crisis. There are external crises, whether it is a Taiwan, there are issues with the other global economies and the global powers. On the other side, they are also not even able to digest the fact that India is growing. India is not only just growing as an economic superpower.
No, but my question is, why not have a discussion in Parliament? The TMC, Mamata Banerjee's party, also put up a notice in Parliament today demanding a discussion. Why is the government not having a proper discussion? Why is it not taking questions from other MPs?
See, I think it's very clear, and even both the House, the government of India, the Defense Minister has placed on record what happened. At least in India as like a democracy, he has explained to the people of the country through the Parliament that what happened that particular incident. But beyond that, going and having a debate and discussion on a matter which is of an India security matter may not be appropriate at this particular time. I think we should leave it there. We should have the faith on one thing. I wanted to tell you, India is not.
But I'm sorry to interrupt there. Why shouldn't I come to this point? These are members of Parliament. They may have legitimate questions to raise. If the government feels that there is certain information that is too sensitive to be shared in public, they can say so. And share it separately in an all-party meeting if necessary. But, why not take some questions?
I think that is
These are members of Parliament.
There are appropriate times when anything related to...
But it's been 2.5 years. Where is that appropriate time for the government to take questions on the Chinese transgressions?
Just imagine that we are talking about China, which is our neighbor, which we have got a long-standing relationship with that particular country. We also have major issues with them. It's not from today or yesterday. It is, remember the 1962. One thing I wanted to tell you, India in 2022 is not the 1962 India. India is not Tibet, which China can just come and take over. India is resisting wherever it is required. As a diplomatically on the border, we have been a much more stronger country in every possible way today. And also we remember, it's not Nehru's India, it is Narendra Modi's India. Here, an inch of land.
Why does Jawaharlal Nehru come into the discourse?
No, why I'm
Jawaharlal
saying
Nehru
that
is
the
not
way-
the Prime Minister anymore.
The way Rohan Gupta,
And there are a lot of things about Nehru's India we need to be proud of.
Politics will not stop.
But anyway,
Nidhi, can I complete?
Rohan Gupta,
I can
go
only
ahead.
tell you that
Rohan
when the-
Gupta, just this one point. There is a one legitimate point there that if there is an ongoing situation at the border which is sensitive, perhaps the government would not be able to share that with Parliament at the moment. Would you understand if they turned around and said, we can't do that?
Absolutely. See, Nidhi, there is a difference between the information which cannot be revealed in Parliament and discussion on the current issue. We also understand that all our MPs are mature enough and they have experience of Parliament regarding that. It's not about that. The point here is different. When you know that China has always attacked India in last 2 to 3 years, when you are in denial, obviously you cannot put pressure on China. You need to have holistic strategy against China where ruling party, opposition, everybody is required. Now trade with China is increasing. There is no action there. How can you build international pressure on China if the ruling party of the country is not, if it is in denial mode that nobody has entered our premises? We are just saying that you need to be honest on the information which is publicly available, which is in public domain, and let us have open discussion. How to create pressure on China, how to create diplomatic pressure on China, take our advice, take our opinion, and let's build consensus.
Let me ask Ambassador KC Singh about this, because
Can I just
Ambassador
give
KC Singh, you worked with different governments over the years as a diplomat, as an advisor. Under the circumstances, what do you think the government can do differently in order to take the opposition and all parties on board, or do you think that they're approaching this the right way?
You see, the first problem is that when Galwan took place, we got ourselves into a corner by saying the Chinese haven't come into India. The Chinese government even took it up. They said, but the Indian government is saying we haven't entered India. Now, there is overlapping perception of the LAC, but I don't think the political leadership should have got into it because they were in a difficult situation. They couldn't say that they have come up to their claim lines and they have breached India's claim lines. So there is a credibility gap there. This time also, the government should have briefed on this situation. The Defense Ministry should have quietly called the media and briefed them that this is something which has happened at the border. A military has acted forthrightly and has pushed them back. And the thing would have died there. Even the Chinese didn't talk about it. They've issued a statement today. And they are saying it's the Indians who crossed the LAC and came to our side. So if the government would take the opposition to confidence, the other political parties into confidence and be in the public space, what is so secret about this? There are satellites today. You have pictures. You can see the position of the two. Foreign powers know it minute to minute what you're doing. Secret would be if there's an ongoing war, like in Ukraine, you don't want to say, what are the weapons you are getting? Whom are you targeting? Which is the next target? Are you opening another front? We're not doing that. It's one particular incident where the army has acted promptly. And if the government had not held back for 2 days, then the opposition would not doubt there is anything wrong with it. So it's media management. Somehow the government seems to feel it is correct that you don't, about POK, Pakistan, they're very forthright comments. We want that area back. We will take them on. But where China is concerned, we seem to have a reluctance. And the additional problem is that we are now chairing G20. And G20 is a very big thing. Prime Minister, government, they are investing a lot in it. It's in the election before, a year before election. And now you don't want the Chinese to rain on your parade because, the Chinese can act difficult. Therefore, the Chinese may be testing you to see, do you want, how much of a pressure will you take? So in that sense, we are expected to behave diplomatically, correctly. We don't want to provoke the Chinese. It's understandable because you don't want any shadow to be cast on the G20. But that then traps you in that thing that I don't want my G20 thing to be affected. By the same time, the Chinese are acting bullishly. So how do you deal with them? The way you deal with them in a democracy is share it. Sit down with the opposition and talk about it. Tell the media, brief them yourself. Rather than
let me ask Konchok Stanzin this question as well.
Last point, Nidhi. Now they said there were minor injuries. The first statement given out was minor injuries. Then Telegraph correspondent rang up BJP's leader there. And that guy said, no, 6 people have been flown to Guwahati. Now, when your information gets contradicted, today the defense minister conceded that there were injuries. But yesterday it was being played down. So when you get contradicted by facts, and the journalists are able to scoop them out, then your credibility gets hit.
So, Konchok Stanzin, let me give you the last word. As someone who has borne the brunt of this Chinese aggression in Ladakh, would you want the government to debate this in Parliament? Would you want to see Parliament talk about this openly? क्या आप चाहते हैं कि पार्लियामेंट में डिस्कशन हो?
जी बिल्कुल, क्योंकि लद्दाख की जो जमीनी हकीकत है वो पूरे इंडिया को नहीं पता है, क्योंकि इस तरीके का जो सिचुएशन है जो मेरे कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंसी में फेस कर रहे हैं, लोगों को फेस कर रहे हैं, वो अगर हाउस ऑफ द पार्लियामेंट में अगर डिस्कशन नहीं हो तो फिर कहाँ? वहां पे बिल्कुल होना चाहिए। और हमारे जितने भी लोग हैं वहां पे बसे लोग हैं, जो प्रॉब्लम आज की डेट में फेस करना पड़ रहा है, उसको भी एक एश्योरेंस मिले ऊपर से। तो ये चीजें जो है बिल्कुल जरूरी है। मैं किसी पार्टी को दोष नहीं देना चाहता हूं, लेकिन ये है कि इस तरीके के जो इश्यूज है जिस पर बिल्कुल सियासत नहीं होना चाहिए और इसमें डिबेट होना चाहिए, डिस्कशन होना चाहिए और तरीका निकलना चाहिए। और ये जो है एक लॉन्ग टर्म तरीका निकलना का एक ही तरीका है जिसका डिबेट और डिस्कशन है। जी,
Thank you very much to all of you for joining us tonight. This is an important story that we'll continue to track. Let's see how it plays out. Thanks very much for being with us. We'll see you all again tomorrow. Good night.